Well, hey there, guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making some homemade pasta. Well, on Friday's show with our newly named Woodworking with Ellie episode, we made a pasta drying rack. And I mentioned that maybe I would do a pasta making video for the following show. So I spoke to Mrs. Kenny and asked her what she thought, and she was all for it. Now, guys, let me just state right from the beginning, I am no expert at pasta making. Neither is my wife. She has made it once, and I have made it 0 times. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the equipment, the steps, give you the recipe that we used, and go through how to make the pasta in order for you to be able to do it at home if you want. So without further ado, let's head into the kitchen and get this show going. Well, I guess the first thing that we'll talk about is the equipment that we're going to use in order to make the pasta. And for us, we have only ever used the KitchenAid stand mixer because that is what we have. And we've only ever made pasta one other time. So we are far from experts. If you don't have a stand mixer, I'm sure there are other ways to mix it, but this show is not going to be doing those ways. As well, we also have for the KitchenAid stand mixer, we have the pasta attachment, which will roll your pasta to the thickness that you want, as well as cutting it to the desired shape, I guess we'll call it, with one side being a fettuccine type noodle and the other side being spaghetti. And the thickness dial is this knob on the end, and it's adjusted by pulling it and rotating it. We'll get into that a little later. As far as ingredients goes, there are only 4 in order to make homemade pasta. You would have your eggs, we have flour, we have olive oil, and fine salt. In other words, table salt, guys. Don't use the coarse sea salt. As well, with the eggs, you want them to room temperature. As far as that goes, if you're wondering what room temperature is, you can leave them out of your fridge for about an hour. I wouldn't go any further than an hour just in case, but at an hour at room temperature, they should be fine. Why do you want the eggs at room temperature? Because if not, the chilled eggs will actually cool your dough too much, and it makes it difficult to mix because it makes the dough too thick. Now, you may notice here that I have this 00 style pizza flour. It's not pizza for us, it's going to be for pasta, but the 00 is the grind. It's actually a very fine flour. But not to worry, if you don't have this, you can use all-purpose, and we have successfully made pasta using the all-purpose flour, and it's been just fine. But today we're actually going to try the actual 00 style that it calls for and see if we see that there's a difference or not. So that's it. That's the 4 ingredients we need. So why don't we go through the recipe here? We'll get the ingredients into our stand mixer and we'll get this mixing up. So in the bowl of your stand mixer, you're going to want to place 2.5 cups of flour, whether it be 00 or whether it be all-purpose. You're going to need 4 large eggs at room temperature, as I stated earlier, 1 teaspoon of fine salt, and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. From there, you can install the dough hook in your stand mixer, place your bowl in place, and you want to knead this with your stand mixer for 8 to 10 minutes until the dough is smooth and elastic. At some point in time, you may need to scrape the ingredients off the side of the bowl to get them incorporated in the middle. I know the temptation is huge just to reach in with that spatula and try and do it while it's running, but really, guys, shut it off. It only takes a second. Scrape it into the middle, and then you can raise your bowl back up and start the mixer up again. Now, while the temptation may also be there to add water to this, guys, don't do it. Although it looks dry, don't worry, it will incorporate all together. I'm being told this by the one that normally makes the pasta, so I thought I better add that little tidbit. And once your dough looks to this consistency, you can start timing for your 8 to 10 minutes.
That's 3 minutes.
And after your 10 minutes, you should have something that looks like this. Now, guys, truth be told, we tried this 00 style flour, and honestly, we didn't like it. We ended up actually scrapping the dough and not using it. It was a little too dense for our liking, and the mixer was having some problems kneading it. I even tried kneading it by hand. It was just too difficult. So our first experience with making pasta was with all-purpose flour, and it worked out really well. Our second one, we tried the 00 style, didn't like it. And with this batch that we're looking at right here, we actually went back to the all-purpose and are much happier with the results. So there you go. Yeah, the choice is yours, but we prefer the all-purpose. So at this point in time, what you want to do is remove your dough from your stand mixer, and you want to wrap it tightly in plastic wrap. You want to let it rest for at least 30 minutes at room temperature. Well, our dough has been resting for the 30 minutes, and we'll now install our pasta maker attachment. Guys, I don't know what attachment you have, so I can't guide you as far as how to install it. So this one just slides in, and then a retaining bolt tightens to keep it in place. At this point in time, you want to adjust your thickness knob to its largest setting. In this case, I think it's setting number 8. Mm-hmm. And we need to cut our dough into quarters. So you'll take 1/4, that will be the one you're working with, but the other ones you want to wrap up in the cellophane again, just so they don't dry out while you're working with the first quarter. And at this point, you want to flatten your dough so that it is a flat oval that will fit in the width of your pasta maker. And in this case, it's the center slot that rolls it out, but you will basically turn on your mixer on low speed and feed the dough into the center press area. This will make it an even thickness all the way along.
Okay, and then you step it down 1 notch, like 1 thickness. So from 8, in my case, to 7. And then you would do another pass. And you keep on lowering the number and rolling it through until you get to the thickness you want. I'm gonna go down to 1. I'm gonna do it.
Do it.
So long.
Well, this is the point in time that we need the pasta drying rack that we made on Tuesday's show on the Woodworking with Ellie episode. Guys, we took this down to 1, which is a nice, even, thin dough. You can see the size of this thing that little oval made. We're going to place it through the spaghetti cutting side because we want spaghetti noodles this time. And from there, we will use a plastic straw to just drape it over one of our 5/16 dowels on our drying rack. Well, we'll probably have to drape this over 2 different dowels. The fettuccine was a little thicker. We did that to a setting of 2, so the noodles were not as long here. Of course, at this point as well, we could cut the noodles and just, have them so that they will drape properly. And I think that's what we're going to do. So let's get these cut here, and we'll drape them over the next dowel, and we'll run another batch through. So cutting those lengths in half works a lot better for us. They were just too long for this drying rack, and that's fine. And honestly, I think they would be too long for any drying rack because we took it down to 1, but we do want thinner noodles. So once we get them all shaped, we will lay them on the drying rack and leave them there for 30 minutes minimum, 2 hours maximum. Guys, once the pasta has dried for its 30 minutes on the rack, you have a few options. You can cook it right away and have super fresh pasta if you wish, or If you don't want to form it, you can put that dough in the fridge wrapped up in that cellophane for at least a day. I wouldn't go further than a day, but leave it in there for 24 hours if you want. If you want to make the pasta for the next day, if you want to, after the pasta is formed and dried, you can place it in a freezer safe bag or container and freeze it. And then you just cook it straight from frozen. So you could make this a couple days in advance if you had company coming over or what have you. As well, there is another option where you can dry this. You can dehydrate it and store it for much, much longer. But guys, all you've done at that point in time is make your normal, everyday, store-bought dried pasta. And there's nothing really special about it at that point, because you've just duplicated what they make in the stores. So although it is fresh ingredients and you know exactly what's in it, it's the same thing as what you get in the store pretty much. So if you want fresh, do it fresh. But there are options, so just keep that in mind. And there you have it. Homemade pasta. Guys, this process is, number one, easy. So easy. I'm actually surprised at how easy it was. Number two, it is actually a lot of fun. We had fun making this show, and it's always nice to do something with somebody else, especially someone that you love. When you get together and you have a little bit of fun together and do something different that you would normally do, it's a learning experience for both of you, whether it be out here in the shop or whether it be in the kitchen. It's still a load of fun, and we had a great time doing it. And number three, it's delicious. It was so good. But the one thing about this entire project is the learning process, because there's always something to learn. And what we learned in essence is, when you cut your noodles, separate them when they're on the drying rack. We cut all the spaghetti noodles, and what we figured was going to happen is that we would just drape them over the drying rack and then you could just separate them afterwards. Nah, that didn't happen. When we tried to separate them after the drying rack, they just ended up falling apart, just basically breaking into tiny pieces. And while you can cook those pieces and eat them, there's nothing wrong with them, it's not really what we were after. So what we did is we shifted gears, made another batch of dough, and made some fettuccine, which is what we made the first time that we had such great success with it. And in making the fettuccine, when we put it on the drying rack, we separated all of the noodles just slightly, because otherwise they stick back together. They kind of weld themselves back together, and as they dry, it becomes hard to separate. Guys, as far as cooking this stuff goes, it's all dependent on how thick you make it. You can put it in boiling salted water and cook it anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes, depending on the thickness of your pasta. 3 minutes kind of thing for the fettuccine worked just great. It had a really nice texture and worked really well for the recipe. And in this case, we had it with spaghetti sauce, but that's okay. To each their own. It was still awesome. It was so good. Now, that double O flour, we had some problems with that, and I kind of equate it to its density. Because it is a finer grind of flour, it's kind of like taking 2.5 cups of flour, or let's say sand. 2.5 cups of sand and 2.5 cups of pebbles are going to have a different consistency because there's more air in the space between the pebbles, and the sand is a lot more dense. And that's kind of the way I equated it. So we will be making experiments with this and maybe trying a half and half, or maybe reducing the amount of that double O flour, or maybe 2 cups of all purpose and half a cup of the double O, or work it however you can, like mix it up, experiment with it, and try different mixtures just to give it a whirl. Now, while I did say not to add water, eggs come in different varieties and different sizes. It is possible at some point in time that your dough may be too thick or too dry, and it's just not mixing. And after you've given it an awful lot of time to try to incorporate together, if it still hasn't, you can add a tiny bit of water. But guys, I stress tiny amount, half a teaspoon. Put it in there and just wait and see what happens. Don't go crazy. You're not really overworking this stuff, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's not like, say, putting baking powder into a recipe and you overwork it and then nothing rises, because there's nothing to rise with pasta. Guys, either way, this is an absolutely a load of fun. It's a great project. There was one other thing that I learned that I want to bring to your attention because it's so important. That pasta rack, this was the first time that we used it. And those fold-in legs that we made on the Woodworking with Ellie program, they allow the rack to fall forward if you weight it too much to the front end. And I'm not going to say who weighted it too much to the front end, but it may have been somebody here on this show. And the rack tipped over. So we ended up having to weight the rack down with just a cutting board at the base. It wasn't that big of a deal. I may change things up with that. I may remove one of the dowels, lengthen it so that I can have two larger legs that will fold out and fully support the rack. I'll sort of play with that and see how it goes. I'll let you know on an update show what happens. Either way, guys, it's a load of fun. It's so delicious. I can't even tell you how good it is. All I can say is you gotta give this one a try. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope you've enjoyed the program. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We have an amazing audience base here, and I'm hoping that you're going to consider becoming a part of that. Guys, once again, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've learned something today. I hope you've been inspired to try this yourself. I hope you've gotten hungry. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesdays.
Today we're making pasta.
That gets done out in the shed.
I feel like I'm on a cooking show. That's right. You be my cellophane boy. Have you used this before? Thank you.
You used this before? Check. Okay. Test yours.
Checkity, check. Check.
Okay, fine.
Oh, I have to blow my nose.
Okay. She has to blow her nose. Yeah, did you hear that? She keeps forgetting that she's mic'd up. So our pasta has... It's not pasta yet. Dough. So our dough has been resting. You're wasting a lot of memory cards right here.
I'm not doing anything.